The reason we embarked on the 4-day week is we really wanted to revisit that idea that, this 5-to-2 ratio where you work for 5 days and then you only have 2 days for rest, so to speak, or 2 days to spend with family. And as new mothers as well, it just became a ratio that we just weren't happy with. So when the 4-day week opportunity came up to be part of the ANZ pilot group, we jumped at the opportunity. We could have done this at our own pace. We could have done this anytime. You don't need to join a pilot group per se or be part of the 4-day week organization. But what we reaped from it is the advice of mentors. We're also part of a global study so that we could actually gain a lot of those insights from other companies that are sharing their experiences as well. And that's been run with a conglomerate of different universities, including the University of Cambridge. How 4-day week works for us: we close on a Friday because we are a relatively small agency. We're about 5 to 10 people. I say that because we dial up and down depending on the workloads. We have a bank of freelancers that we use. We also have a UK office. So we actually do the flip. We do the inverse in the UK. We'll do Tuesday to Friday in the UK, Monday to Thursday here, so that we can help those last minute client requests on a Friday be steamrolled over to the UK. The beauty of it, though, is that 99% of our clients and their requests are always acknowledging that we work Monday to Thursday.
I think it's important to put in context the huge amount of interest in the 4-day work week. I'm pretty prolific on LinkedIn and do a lot of posting. By far and away, my most popular post in terms of number of impressions was on the 4-day work week, and tens of thousands of people responded. An order of magnitude more than any of the other posts I put on. So it's quite clear that it is really the zeitgeist in many ways at the moment. It's important, I think, to put it in the context of us having come out of a pandemic over the last 2.5, 3 years. And our research shows that it's really critical to understand how that has transformed work. And we're finding that, Australian workers are exhausted. More than 1 in 3 are doing more hours now than before the pandemic. And that's seen in terms of 1 in 2 workers working outside their standard hours on a weekly basis, and 1 in 4 doing it daily. And it's understandable why a 4-day work week would be a very attractive option to them. Putting aside the 4-day work week, I think we also need to revisit the 5-day work week, right? And to make sure that it's it's a 37.5-hour week or whatever it is for most employees. So our research shows that work practices have become less efficient, right? Particularly because of the pandemic. So there's a lot of more Zoom and team meetings that are actually ineffective, and they chew up a lot of people's work hours, during their standard hours. And so they're having to work outside those standard hours to get their tasks and work done for the day. So, I think we also, while we're talking about the 4-day work week, maybe even talk about the 5 and how we can make the 5 more manageable for those workers that may not have opportunity to work for 4. Now, I'm a little bit of a contrarian on this. I actually think the future of work is less about productivity and more about creativity and innovation. And so my concern about the 4-day work week is that we're forcing workers to focus much more just on productivity. And at a time when intelligent technologies are getting better and better at doing a lot of the work that humans have been able to do. I've got a colleague, or a friend rather, who works in a creative industry, and he's thinking this Chat GPT is fantastic. And so he's concerned that a lot of the work that they used to generate from clients at a very basic, simple level is going to increasingly be done by AI, and a lot of that is just productive work in a traditional kind of way. So I'm a little bit concerned that the 4-day work week is going to take us and focus much more on productivity at a time when that is competing against technologies that are increasingly more adept at doing that kind of productive work. Whereas we need to, in my view, unleash the human in the worker.
I think it's a really valid point that you make. And interestingly, you're not talking to a company or an agency that we don't focus on productivity as a metric that we measure our performance against, because we are at our heart a creative agency. We only hire designers. We don't actually have account people. There's no middleman between the client and the designer. So creativity, when I say productivity, it's hilarious, because how do you measure how creative someone can be? Most people get their best ideas never at their computers, never at their desk. So creativity is definitely how we measure the output that we push out. How much does it meet that client brief? And what I've found with the 4-day week working in a creative industry is that our designers come back much more invigorated, energized, enriched, relaxed. Trying to come up with creative concepts and strategies under pressure when you're tired is obviously near impossible. And burnout in creative minds, I think, is a lot higher. And that's anecdotal, I have to say. Just because we, to get inspired and to get like that stimulus from not being at a desktop, essentially, needs you to be able to step away, you look outside, get some fresh air, talk to people around you. And I think what's interesting is that 4-day week gives us a lot back, because I feel that the designers definitely take that 5th day to unwind, recharge, re-energize, and almost like recalibrate their brains a little bit.
It's good to know that you've perhaps figured out the magic formula. Of course, not all organizations are able to work in that fashion. And I think that, you certainly measure productivity in terms of how you define creativity. But for most organizations, Unilever is in the news at the moment. There's an accounting firm and so forth that are looking at the 4-day work week. It really lends itself to work that can be easily bundled and, and delivered to a worker, so that within the 4-day work week, they know exactly what they need to do and how much they need to, what their output is expected over that period of time. And, that's really how it's going to work in that 100-80-100 model. Personally, I'd like to see a 100-80-80 model. I'd like to actually see less productivity in the way that it's, traditionally or conventionally defined in terms of units of output, but still allowing opportunity for innovation and creativity.
I can understand that a company such as Mediacom or Unilever or any other kind of big global multinational, it's very hard to just decide to close the office on one singular day. But there's other formats of 4-day week. And what I love about the concept, and if companies do this well, is that they can take the choice to the worker, to the day-to-day employee, and ask them from the ground up what they believe would be the best solution in the scenario. And you kind of like put the onus on them to come up with a solution. I think then it's not top down, but it's bottom up, which is the best way to succeed if you want to implement the 4-day week.
I think it's really important to recognize that not all workers are equal, and that while a bottom-up approach will work for many workers, it won't always work for all of them. And it's a little bit of a paradox. The research we've done on flexible working more generally shows that workers will die in a ditch over having flexible working, right? But it is actually stressing them out. There's too much decision fatigue associated with it. Where am I going to work today? Who's going to be there? What am I going to do? How am I going to do it? And so that allowing too much flexibility has created so much uncertainty as to how a worker is able to make a decision. And in the same way, I think with the 4-day work week, there has to be some guardrails around it, right? Some direction, and you're not necessarily telling a worker how it has to fit in with their life, but some, direction and boundaries around how the 4-day work week could not only work for them, But I think it's essential. You do have to balance it with the needs of the organization, and to get that equation right. And I think that's certainly what you're suggesting, Rasha, in the work that you're doing. Where it comes to frontline workers, and in fact, office workers, knowledge workers, I think it's really important to call this out in the sense that the 4-day work week is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. Workers want better work-life balance and better well-being in their lives. The 4-day work week or flexible working is just a vehicle to attain that. So for frontline workers who necessarily have to turn up to a particular location, and many of them actually, they can't work maybe less hours. To drive better well-being outcomes is for many organizations, identifying the pain points that worker has in their job, eliminating admin work, or allowing more flexibility in terms of the start and finish times, as you were mentioning. So, in other words, look at the problem from really what the worker wants. First of all, there's under the Fair Work system, there's an obligation and a compliance obligation for employers to know when their employees are working. And particularly, it could be the 5-day week or a 4-day week. If workers are taking time off in the middle of the day to take advantage of flexible working, but are working, at 3 a.m. in the morning or 10 p.m. at night, depending on the type of contractual arrangement, that could actually mean that employee is eligible for overtime. And because there's an assumption under the Fair Work system that the hours that they work it's an implied at the direction of the employer. So there needs to be a much better line of sight from employers to employees in terms of when they work. And we think that employees, to some extent, are underreporting the amount of work that they're doing outside their standard hours. Another is most recently, the federal government passed the new IR legislation, which enshrines rights for certain cohorts of workers for flexible working. Now, I think that would apply to a 5-day work week model or a 4-day work week model, right? If you're a person with caring responsibilities, or you're living with disabilities, or if you're an older person, you have a right to negotiate with your employer about flexible working arrangements that work for you.
What we did from our experience is because we are on a pilot study, everything was maintained. So we basically could easily say that, in terms of the contracts, in terms of your leave time, your personal leave, in terms of your salary, sick leave, everything was absolutely maintained. Nothing was touched, nothing was tweaked. The buy-in was the fact that this is a pilot program. And if we are going to continue with this as a permanent change to the company, then we'll be reviewing all the contracts. So interestingly, to your point, is I find it a lot easier to go in under the radar of a pilot or under the guise of a pilot first to kind of like nut through all those little pain points. So a 6-month pilot is a long time, 6 months, half a year is a decent amount of time to get all your ducks in a row, anticipating that if this goes really, really well, then obviously we can change all of our HR policies. People get the same amount of leave as they do if they were working 5 days. So they still get the 20 days off in a year, plus the additional 48 Fridays basically in the year as well.
I see the 4-day work week as part of the flexible working umbrella. It is one of the options that we're considering in terms of having some flexibility, driving better work-life balance outcomes. There's no doubt that the 4-day work week is going to work well for some organizations. I don't think it's going to be a panacea for all organizations across the economy for many different reasons. But certainly, I think it's for those organizations where it does work, I'm really interested to learn how does it work? But also, what are they learning about themselves by going through that process, both as workers, but also as organizations? Perhaps part of my concern of the 4-day work week is that workers become very focused just on their work, and there's social gatherings, there's less time for that. Learning from others from across the organization is diminished. So I'm a little bit concerned that may impact career opportunities, for example.
I think what we should be looking at are those star best practice case studies who seem to be doing this frictionlessly well. and we have to kind of look at the criteria and the reasons and the levers as to why it's working so well. And look, we are a small organization, and we definitely have had pain points along the way. I think, there's so many different anecdotal evidence across all the different pilot groups that have embarked on this initiative. But I think looking towards the companies that are doing it, in the best way possible is by far the gold standard that we should all be trying to aim for. I know that before we even embarked on this, we were very, very conscious that our benchmark in order to make this succeed was that we weren't using it to band-aid any inherent solutions within the business. So, we have a very open and transparent communication policy. We've got, great engagement from people. What we did find was there were wasted hours, basically, at the beginning of Mondays and the closing of Fridays. And basically, instead of having like an 8-hour day on a Monday to Friday, you'd probably be doing 6-hour days. There's a lot of water cooler chat. What did you do on the weekend? Which, you can't replace. I think that's really valuable to a company culture. But at the same time, what was interesting is that we pivoted our thinking and even our ways of working to ensure that we had the focus time and the stuff that we weren't doing right. It's definitely not a band-aid solution covering a bigger problem. It's a perk, I would say.
I wouldn't necessarily describe it in that manner, but what I would be interested to, because I think it's just a new form of working, and a different type of setting. I'm really interested to see what is learnt from the 4-day week experiment that can actually inform the 5-day week in terms of, being much clearer in terms of work-life boundaries, in terms of what is the most effective work that an employee should be doing, while they're actually working. I think that they're really important and valuable lessons for the 5-day week. I don't think employers, for the most part, should be looking to monitor or surveil their employees in any way at all. The number one measure from an employer to an employee is trust. I trust you to do the work that we expect you to do, and in a manner and a level of quality that is required of this organization.
I think I absolutely agree with Sean in this. If you don't trust your employees, or if you've got some inherent cultural problem that, there's lack of transparency, there's office gossip, it's too hierarchical, you have really negative, employee surveys, then you should not be embarking on anything like this unless there's trust in the first place. You have to treat employees as adults, and in that way, you also reap the benefits of that. Like, people are much more entrepreneurial. They come to you with, different ways of thinking. You give them permission to fail, to come up with new ideas, to innovate, as Sean was saying. And by imparting that trust, you get a lot back as well.